Oh, okay. Just so you know, the recording is in progress. All right. Well, hi there, everybody. I am Lee McKenzie, and I am the author of She Seems So Normal, Shatter the Plastic Princess, Embrace Authentic Faith. And honestly, this is a very exciting video series I really wanted to bring to people who have experienced any sort of abuse or trauma, because today I have my friend Ciji Wagner of louderthansilence.org with me today. And I have learned so much at her feet. I have learned so much in her cohorts as a child sexual abuse survivor and trauma survivor, and I'm very indebted to her wisdom and guidance, everything else. So, hey there, CG, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for doing this. This is really amazing to be part of this, right? That just recognizing how important it is for us to band together and not be trying to do this work alone. So thank
Oh,
you for, asking me to do this and setting this all up.
absolutely. So CG has like a really incredible story, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it before we hop into what the format's going to be today. She was driving home from a therapy appointment one day, and she had this thought: why am I paying to undo the damage of someone else's wrongdoing? And from there, Louder Than Silence was born. She had quite an eclectic path to lead her to today, but she grew up in rural Pennsylvania. She graduated from the Culinary Institute of America, so make sure that you like get a hold of her later on and get some good baking tips. And she has worked at a mix of bakery and restaurant gigs over the years. She eventually landed in Washington, D.C., and was executive chef for a nonprofit. And she had sworn she would never want to run a nonprofit of her own. Funny how these things work out, right? And she moved to Austin. She found her passion and her motivation with Louder Than Silence. And from that moment, CG has used her own experiences of sexual violence to guide the direction of LTS, providing resources and community she always wished she had in this journey. Amen. She wants every survivor to know that they are not alone and that there is hope for a better tomorrow. This, you have an incredible story. And it's amazing when you have survivors in the room together. We don't have to like make the explanation, right?
Right.
So tell us a little bit about Louder Than Silence right now.
Great. Yes, so Louder Than Silence, as you mentioned, started from this idea of how can we get resources to survivors? Like that's really where it started. And from there, I've kind of just seen it blossom. So, as you mentioned as well, we have these like workshop cohorts, we do retreats, we have self-care kits, we do all sorts of different things, just trying to help survivors know that really they are not doing this on their own. They're not trying to figure out how to navigate through this like messy, painful web just single-handedly, that there is community that exists, and really wanting to create the spaces for survivors to be together, right? To like show up with all of it, right? And not have to feel like we are pretending, like you said, shattering the plastic princess, that we don't have to try to sit in a space and be like, oh yeah, I'm fine. We can sit in the space and be like, yeah, everything feels like it's falling apart today. And then have other people be like, yeah, me too. Like,
I
I'm
think that's
there.
one of the best parts of the cohorts is that there's no
Yes.
judgment. It's like the no judgment zone. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can actually really be myself. I can let it down and like let my hair hang out and be the
Yes.
ugly and actually express the ugly. And people aren't going, oh my gosh, like you are not very like faithful, or oh my gosh, you said that to your daughter, or oh my gosh, you did that today. Oh my gosh. It's
Mhm.
just so nice that somebody that you created these cohorts, and you've also created a beautiful curriculum that goes with it too. So again, I learned so much from Louder Than Silence, and because of that, one of the things I really wanted to talk about in these videos, this is going to be a series of multiple videos, and our purpose and aim today is this: what is one step you can take right now to getting the mental, the emotional, the physical, or the spiritual support that you need? Whether you are, whatever kind of survivor you are, if you have endured trauma, If you are somebody who is desperate for community, or maybe you're afraid of community, you want to look for a trauma therapist. We're going to be covering that too. We're going to talk about basically what happens. How do we keep going in our therapy? How do we keep moving forward? And then in the very end, we're going to have 3 steps, CG's 3 steps about how to begin healing and wholeness. And again, I'm really excited about this because we're going to have some resources as well. Are you ready, CG?
Oh, I am ready.
I knew you would be. All right. Our first part today is part 1. How do you know a community is safe?
All right. Yes. And what I love about this question is that I get this question so much, right? It's something that you and I chatted about because, this idea of how do we make sure, right, that we're not putting ourselves in harm's way again, and it's so important to make sure that we are creating that like healthy foundation. And so what I do when I go through this with people is I ask them to think of a group that really felt great, right? Like the space that they were in where it's like, yep, I can be me, and that's totally fine. All parts of me are welcome here. And then maybe think of some groups where that wasn't necessarily the case. So then we can have these ideas of like, oh, right, like I've experienced this before, and we already have those resources then within ourselves to know how to move forward, right? So yes, it's always helpful to get resources, but it's really the how do we assimilate them so we can continue
I
forward.
love that so
Yeah.
much because that just helps us. I mean, it's not like it's totally brand new. We have to figure this all out ourselves. Like we've
Right.
experienced safe. We just
Yeah.
sometimes don't realize that we've been experiencing
Right.
safe, right? But
Right.
just to actually be intentional in our heads of going, this is what this should feel like. This is what this should look like.
Right.
Oh, love it.
Exactly. Exactly. So first I'll go through some of the like what it is, like what we are looking for when we're looking for a safe community, and then I'll go through some red flags, kind of what it's not, right? So for what it is, we always want to have the community be focused on, have the primary goal of building health, providing a space for healing, community, something to the end of here's a space for us to be together, right? So they might phrase it differently, but really to have this kind of be the goal of the community. And then it's also great to have a list of common values or some sort of like guidelines for the group, kind of depending on what sort of group we're talking about. But having an idea of, okay, before I step in through the door or before I join the Zoom meeting, do I know what this group is saying? Yes, we all agree to X things walking into this space. And then from there, it's there's a lot of pieces, right? And one big piece is being able to both identify and then articulate our emotions, right? That we all have very different experiences and some can be quite difficult to express, but being able to say, hey, actually what you said, it brings up something in me. Like I feel this like knee jerk, like, oh, protective, response. Well, great. Now you've been able to articulate it, right? Like it's not creating a space between people because it's out there for us to work through together.
And I think that that was one of the really helpful things to be able to go through is like a lot of people who are trauma survivors, emotion is like, huh? Like,
Yes.
and where am I feeling? I'm on autopilot, man. I'm just trying to survive right now. And
Right.
so to actually be able to have a space to step back, first off, to have safe space that this is a safe sphere, your
Mhm.
safe circles of security. And then to be able to have let's articulate the emotion. Like I was just telling somebody the other day, I run between fear,
Mhm.
anger, sometimes sadness, and then like happy, like that
Yes.
whole circle thing that you're supposed to know, like all these nuances. I'm like,
Right.
yeah, I mean, I'm getting better, I'm getting a little bit more gray, but like to actually have more emotion and understanding the different kinds of emotions that I can actually have and be more specific and
Mhm.
focused in and why, super huge to be able to say
Yeah.
that out. So
Yes, and just the practice of being vulnerable with those feelings, right? That, it's very difficult to put ourselves out there if we aren't sure if other people are going to. And so if everybody in the space is willing to say like, yep, I'm showing up tonight and I'm kind of angry. Well, great. Like we all know where we're at. And it's not one person worrying if like she's the one who's like
Right.
not in line with everybody else, right?
Yeah. And
And
all the emotions are okay. And then
yes,
we can also go, oh, Lee's kind of an angry one tonight. So she might be coming from a space of angry.
exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Understanding.
Yes. Um, and and speaking of understanding, one of the big things too is having a space where people aren't automatically trying to give advice or just like make the problem go away, right? And having a space where it's okay to just sit with the discomfort and not just automatically try to, brush it aside. That I think we've all sort of probably at some point in time felt like people were trying to fix us or fix the problem for us. And really what we're asking for in these community spaces to say, no, I just need to be me. Like,
I was
can
going
I
to
just
ask
be
you, I was
me?
going to ask you, why is it, what is it about fixing that makes the person who's sharing feel so dumb or bad? Or why does fixing not necessarily work so much a lot of times?
Well, because it's not a problem that can be fixed, right? Like a problem that can be fixed is like I have a flat tire on my car. Like a problem, right? Like that like if you're showing up to a group and you're like, hey, I have a flat tire, of course the group's going to be like, oh, I actually like I have a pump in my car or I have the
Only
fix
it
in
would be that
black or
easy, right?
right. But I mean, if we're talking about long-term traumatic experiences, there's not one fix. There's not one sentence that somebody can share and just make it all go away. Right. And so I think from my experience, the feeling like somebody's trying to fix it leads me to feel like, oh, like there's not an understanding of the depth of what I've gone through. And the trying to fix means that the state that I am in is not okay, right? That like the group is saying where you are at makes the group uncomfortable, so we have to back away. And what engaging actually looks like, and it might be a little bit counterintuitive, engaging doesn't look like trying to fix. Engaging looks like sitting there and saying, do you want to share more? Right? Not share more, not automatically I'm going to tell you, but a like here is my energy, my being, my presence with you, and that is actually supporting the
And
person.
giving the person a choice and saying, do you feel
Right.
comfortable? You want to share more? Like that is, we don't often get asked that, right?
Not I don't often get asked that.
Like,
Yes.
CJ, would you like to share more about that? And then like we actually are like, wait, someone's asking my permission for something, because a lot of us who are traumatized, that was the problem. We
Yes.
said no, and people didn't get permission, and we were made to do all or do none, or like you had to be this all or none thing. And so to have the
Yes.
volition to be able to, yeah, I bet that's beautiful. All right, keep going, keep going. I love your
Okay.
stuff. Okay, go, go,
Yes.
go.
Um, so any sort of group discussions also like should be facilitated by people who are being authentic, right? That it's not oh, here's the curriculum and I know exactly how to do all of these things perfectly and I am just going to tell you, right? It's somebody who's like, yeah, okay, so tonight we're discussing anger. I have some feelings about discussing, and being that person who is willing to say, like, yes, we are truly in this together. And sure, I might be facilitating the conversation, but I'm right here with everybody. I'm not
Love
above
that.
everybody, I'm with. And
So love that.
that's
Yeah.
yeah, it's very
Oh,
important.
very inclusive.
Yes. And to the end of being inclusive, right, that the community, the group, whatever we're talking about exactly, respects the dignity of all people, regardless of the beliefs, the values, the principles, right? Believing in the dignity of the person or the people in the space. And that is, you know, again, going back to this idea of like creating community space for healing, recognizing the inherent value of everybody, even if we don't see eye to eye, right? And, you know, then being able to like kindly and respectfully, but like push back, right? We can disagree with others, and at the end of our time together, have built more community, have built better connection, that we don't have to all, you know, fall in line in order to be part of the group. We can say, oh, actually, I have a hard time with that. And then have a conversation where the conclusion is everybody feels heard and is moving forward collectively together.
Yeah, and non-judgmental and not like I'm right, you're wrong. There's
Right.
nothing worse than like people feeling like there's like the person with all the air in the room, and it's like if you don't agree with their air, you don't get to breathe it. That's that is something that is really important. I love these principles, and this is for, honestly, I feel like this could be used in, we're not even talking necessarily about survivor groups. I'm
Right.
thinking about like you go in and you are applying for a job and you're interviewing, you know, what
Yeah.
does this environment look like? Is this a safe environment here? Is there somebody who really does suck the air out of the room, or it's either their way or the highway? I'm thinking about like if you're walking into even like religious organizations or anything you think about like joining where there's groups of people. I'm like, even your friend groups, I'm thinking this is like the
Yes.
basics of like human interactions. But a lot of times I'm sitting here like, oh, wow. Yeah, I wish I would have done that one. A team you're going to join. Oh, wow.
Yes.
I wish I would have done that one because, you know, I didn't have these. I was never equipped
Right.
with this. So really, I think a lot of people out here are going to be like, oh, well, yeah, but I, yeah, that makes sense. But I've never been told that.
Yes.
So great
Yeah.
advice. All
Um,
right.
yeah, and I think that one of the things that I'm starting to kind of unravel myself is, and I heard this quoted in a book I was reading last week, is this idea of like a good teacher is not teaching something new. They're teaching something you already know but didn't have words for, right? And so like if what I'm saying today, like it shouldn't feel like totally out of the blue, like, oh, I've never even considered anything like that. It really is a like, okay, you know, you feel it, but you maybe didn't have words to be able to understand what the next step is here,
It's
right?
almost like you're allowing people to trust themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's what as
Yeah.
you're saying this, I'm like, so if I'm feeling that good, happy feeling, I can trust that good, happy feeling. That's not going to betray me. How many
Right.
times, where did I experience this in the past? What did that feel like? What did it look like? Like you're already equipping, like you said, you're already equipping people with what they know, but what they might not know.
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
like
Yeah.
have up here, like you know it, but you've never actually put words to it. Beautiful, beautiful, CG.
Thank you. A few more quick points on the what it is, right? Like what we're looking for. We want to make sure that these spaces we're in, people are willing to empathize and understand other people's experiences. That it is a space where it's like, oh yeah, do you want to tell me more? And that is the posture of the space. And part of that is asking good questions, right? That it's making sure that we are listening well enough to be able to ask good questions, that you know somebody's talking about a family dynamic, and if we respond with the like, oh, so do you need like help getting your kids to soccer practice, like that's not maybe where we're at here, right? And so just making sure that we're asking questions relevant to what's happening. And if I was to distill all of this down into like one very simple phrase, it is that a community that is safe will always promote healthy boundaries, right?
That's
That
good.
they're saying that like what we're doing here is to provide this net for for all of the people involved, and that we are supporting your ability to recognize within yourself what you want and need and articulate it, and we're promoting that with everybody.
So good. And again, a lot of traumatized people do not have very good boundaries.
Yeah, I
That's
feel
what the
like
problem is.
that might be the next series. So
Right on. Oh my
yeah.
gosh, CG, this is like, again, this is what to look for when you are trying to find a community for yourself, when you are wanting to have, when you're analyzing, is this a good place for me to be sharing my stuff? Because
Mhm.
I talk a lot about share with safe people. All right,
Right.
what does safe even mean? Because I don't know what safe is, Lee. Tell me what that means. And so, really, this is a whole point. I want to give the practical, the logical, the this is
Right.
what you look for. You have the checklist, and we can do, do, do. And then you're like, oh yeah. And when you do it again, and then you do it again, and
Yeah.
then you get a lot more confidence in the choices that you're making, and
Right.
who you're allowing yourself to be really, intimate, like with your emotions, with your story, with your everything else. So this is super duper important. I know that CG, you're going to want to start talking as well. I'd love for you to talk about red flags in
Yes.
communities, because I thought this teaching, boy, if we could just get this out there and like with a bullhorn, that would
Yes.
be really cool. Give
Yeah.
us your red flags.
All right. Um, so a big red flag is if the primary goal of the community is like theological or ideological buy-in, right? That is the push. It's not about the people in the room. It's about this must be first step buy-in to this. And I'm not saying not to have shared values or, similar beliefs, nothing like that. It's more of if you don't believe exactly X or if you don't believe exactly Y, then this is not a space for you. And so what happens there is that instead of listening to our knowing, instead of listening to ourselves, then we say, oh, well, I guess even though that doesn't feel great, then I'm still going to do it anyway, right? Because I want to be part of the group. And so those are really big red flags kind of to start. And then uh I laugh because like every time I read this phrase, it like I think of my own experiences. But the use of what's called thought stopping cliches. And so
Lay
those,
it on us.
yeah,
Lay it
right.
on us.
So those are the phrases like, oh, everything happens for a reason. God has a plan. And so why these are called thought stopping cliches is because they don't promote additional conversation, right? If somebody spends 5 minutes just like pouring her heart out and the response is, oh, well, everything happens for a reason. Like, I mean, just imagine how difficult it is to then try after like pouring yourself out to try to start the conversation and like try to rebuild a connection because somebody wasn't that's not actually listening to the person. And what it's saying is this is uncomfortable. Here's the
I'm
line.
done. I
Yeah.
can't do this anymore. It's
Right.
almost like taking a basketball. If you've ever been in a swimming pool, do you remember like when you were a
Yes.
kid and you're like pushing that
Push it.
ball under
Yeah.
the water as far as you can get it? And like
Yes.
the person has just pushed that ball as far as they could under the water.
Yes.
And then when somebody goes, well, everything happens for a reason. I call those BS platitudes, but that's just
Yes.
me. And it's like you just launched a grenade at somebody who's already been traumatized, and then you just re-traumatize them, and then the ball pops up, and there is no way I'm going to be able, if that was me, am I going to take the effort to push that basketball under the water again? That's a lot of effort, especially when you're in a big group,
Mm-hmm.
or if somebody makes light of it or jokes about it. That's it's basically, these are the basic principles of small group leadership.
Yes.
Anyway,
Yes.
another red flag. What else you got?
Something that's called spiritual bypassing. And so this idea is the sense of if somebody's like sharing something that's really difficult emotionally, instead of engaging emotionally, it's then over spiritualizing it or spiritualizing it in a way that creates a wall between the emotion and the person hearing. And so often we see this happening in like Christian circles with like kind of out of context Bible verses, right? Somebody shares and it's like, oh, well, like, let me throw this at you and like spiritualize this instead of engaging with the emotion.
Yeah.
And again, not to say that there's not encouraging, verses to be shared or any of that. It's just make sure we're sharing in a good way, right? Like,
thank you. Can we get an amen in the back?
yes.
That's for you in the
And then also, kind of, more red flags is when we demonize entire groups of people or make like sweeping statements, right, that don't allow for recognizing the human in front of us. Or just the idea of like, oh, well, everyone out there does this all the time, then that will automatically create disconnection and like breed mistrust, right? And so we are learning how to connect well, how to trust safe people, right? And so if there's this idea of like, well, you can never trust X, or you don't ever want this, then that's not building connection, right?
That makes so much sense. And really, honestly, we've been talking about this for traumatized people. How do you figure out safe groups? Like if
Yeah.
you are not traumatized and you're trying to be leading a safe group, have a listen to some of this. That's what I'm thinking. So
Yeah.
all right.
Exactly. And then the next is unwillingness or inability to be vulnerable. That like, yes, it's difficult to be vulnerable, and we're vulnerable to different levels that are appropriate for, the different settings. And yes, of course, all of that. But there's a difference between, oh, I'm recognizing this is not the space for me to talk about X, versus the like, I won't share myself, I won't share that part of who I am when it is an appropriate space to do so. And then part of how that often looks is participate.
CG, you froze. CG, you froze.
All right.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yes.
This is what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember where you were? You were at part of this. You said the word part of this.
Yes.
That's where you
Yep.
start. Go ahead.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, so part of this is sort of like touching on the opposite of what we were talking about earlier, which is participants in the community going into fix-it mode, right? That it is this automatic, all right, here are the 20 steps that will just like make this go away, or whatever it is. That and when I encourage people to think about participating in groups, if you have a practical solution for somebody, i.e. somebody saying, my car broke down, I can't get to this important whatever, to share, oh, actually, I can help with the car thing, let's chat later, right? So you're acknowledging I have this helpful piece, but also like, let's stay in the moment, like, let's stay with this.
That's good.
Yeah, so whenever we see kind of this like tendency towards fix-it mode, that's a red flag.
And it's well-meaning, but don't fix it.
Right, exactly. And then trying to get people to fit a mold or expectations of conformity, that's also a red flag. That, we want people to be thriving as who they are, right? And who they are is, hopefully healing and getting healthier and moving to, a different space. Wonderful. But if we say you're not welcome here unless, then it's just not going to be that space for people. And then one big phrase that I say is a red flag is the I can't imagine. So I can't imagine what that was like for you. I can't. And really often what that means is I won't imagine, like I won't take the time or the energy or the effort to like offer my presence to say, oh, I haven't lived through that, but I can imagine this outcome from experiencing that, or I can understand this piece of it because this piece is connected to what I've been through.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, sorry, go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, I like, if you don't have to have our experiences to go, gosh, I understand what betrayal feels like. I
Exactly.
understand what marginalization feels like. I understand what it means when I've been ignored.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that, Ciji.
Um, and then another big red flag is people telling you like the answer about the situation or your life, where it's, where people are just so nuanced and complex. And so if it's automatic, like, well, here's the answer to what you just shared. And it's like, well,
Do not think I would have already thought of it.
yes, yes. So again, distilling this all down, right? If there's like one takeaway from this whole list of red flags, is that red flags always erode boundaries, right? It always is trying to chip away at the individual's agency and their ability to make decisions for themselves and know within themselves what is good and healthy for them.
Beautiful distillation of all the red flags. And follow us on the next one, for the next part, because we've got how to find a trauma therapist.
Yeah.
Thank you, CG.
Yes. You're very welcome. Thank you.